Does Reading and Leeds have an identity crisis? Reading and Leeds don't really have a set genre anymore. They have bands that play and acts that perform, but they don't really have a set genre or set style in terms of how their festival is going, especially in recent years. There's three aspects I'm going to be looking at. There's the lineup, and then the audience that go to the festivals, and then the organisers and the business behind it, how they see it in terms of merch sales, ticket sales, and overall drawing power that bands bring to the festival. So what is Reading and Leeds even considered as? A rock festival, pop festival, hip hop, anything like that? I have no idea. It's just labelled as alternative. It's not even labelled as anything on the website if you look at it. It's just Reading and Leeds Festival 2018 and that's it. You know, you go download, it's the biggest UK metal festival, and you know, Boomtown is the real underground alternative festival, but Reading and Leeds is just nothing. It's just Reading and Leeds. But in the past, if you look at the festival that started off in 1992, I would say that's the real start of the modern era for Reading and Leeds. It's classed as a rock and indie festival. You know, the first festival in '92 was headlined by the likes of Nirvana and Public Enemy, and the festival continued in that vein for many years to come. And especially in the last 3 or 4 years, they've moved away from that rock and indie, you know, the rock and indie bread and butter, and they're moving towards more mainstream acts. 10 years ago, you look at 2008's Reading and Leeds, and you have the trio of Rage Against the Machine, Metallica, and Killers in their prime, headlining with the likes of Slipknot and the Cribs also on the bill, with some of the best alternative indie, punk, metal that was coming out at the time as well. And you look at the 2018 lineup, and that's just a huge mishmash of bands and acts with a real lack of star quality, I believe. And you look at Rage Against the Machine and Metallica, and they were absolutely huge in their communities, and Killers were at their peak of their careers, with Mr. Brightside coming out a few years beforehand. But Kendrick Lamar, Fall Out Boy, and Kings of Leon, that's a very, very different lineup that we see these days. You don't look at that and think, wow, that is the festival that I have to go to this year. Other acts on the bill that makes it this mismatch, weird identity crisis vibe is you got the likes of Post Malone, Little Pump, but you also have Papa Roach and other acts like that, which really just come out of nowhere. It's like a weird blend of nostalgia and then alternative acts that really didn't fit into the scene at the time and don't even compare to that 2008 lineup that I look at. And you look and go back 2009, 2010, 2011, and I think it was round about 2014, 15, 16, 17 especially, that is where the acts start to, you know, diversify and start to go into this weird identifieless sort of age that we're in now. I do have a few reasons to back this up, why it has diversified so much, and you look at the decline of listenership in rock music especially, and I think last year was a very telling year for that. Hip hop overtook rock music as the most popular genre listened to online for the past, you know, that's the first time that's ever happened, I think, especially in the past decade or so anyway. Rock music has always outdone hip hop, but this time it's the other way around. All bands themselves don't really see Reading and Leeds as a indie or rock mecca anymore that it used to be. You know, bands like would kill to play it, Reading and Leeds, but is that really the case anymore, or is it some other reasons? On the other hand, you look away from the rock and indie artists and you look towards those hip hop artists, those dance artists, those electronic artists, and just alternative to that core Indian rock vibe. And they look at Reading and Leeds and view that as the biggest open air festival that they could play in the UK, aside from somewhere like Glastonbury. I do give props to the organisers for giving bands a chance on the headline slot with the co-headline system that they brought in 2014, I believe it was, with Paramore and Queens of the Stone Age first going out on that system. But on the other hand, I do feel it is a cop-out, especially in recent years. They've just decided to throw out this co-headline system for a bit of a cop-out, whether they can't book bigger bands or whether they just don't really feel as if they can commit to one artist as a headliner, and they feel as if they have to split the headline slot in order to draw more people in. I think you look at the stages and the genre-specific stages that have come in, and they're becoming more and more blurred, especially over the past few years. You had main stage, which was mainly rock and metal. Enemy were your biggest indie acts. The Festival Public stage was the smaller band stage, and then you had the lockup and the pit stage, which were your out-and-out metal acts. The introduction of the One Extra stage was a great way to focus that scene, the grime and hip-hop scene, in the same way that the dance tent did when that was first introduced. But I do think the audience is the biggest factor for this identity crisis. They're the ones that are paying for the acts, and they're the ones that are providing the biggest income into the festival. And you look at Reading and Leeds, it's the biggest end of summer party, with the GCSE and the A-level students finishing up and heading to Reading and Leeds for one last blast before the start of September. As I alluded to earlier, the decline of listenership for rock music has had an impact on the audience, and less rock goers are going and more, dance, hip-hop, grime fans are going to the festival instead. 16 to 25-year-olds is the sound of the youth, so this festival has to be the sound of the youth as well. Kendrick is pretty obvious. This is one of the most hottest and the biggest acts around at the moment. Fall Out Boy as well are gaining popularity in that area, and then Kings of Leon have that nostalgic feel about them. 10 years ago when someone's 15 or, that sort of age, and they hear Sex on Fire for the first time, they're definitely on board to go see the Kings of Leon if they've never seen them before. But when you look around the bill, you have Pendulum, a returning Pendulum that is, and that's great to see, someone come back like that. But at the same time, they're playing with Death Havana and hip-hop superstars at Brockhampton on the same stage. It's a bit weird. It's just evidence of that identity crisis coming through. Or you have acts such as Architects last year getting shoehorned in on the main stage around gigs, and then pop-centric band Against the Current, and someone like Korn playing with Major Lazer and Eminem on the same stage. It just seems a bit out of place. They're not going one way or the other. They seem to just be a mix matching and just having this weird match of bands on the same stage. It's not good, I don't think. In the case of Korn and Architects then, they're just not going to draw a bigger crowd, because you have the likes of Major Lazer or gigs that are playing, and people are going to be there to see them and other acts which are dominating the lineup, and someone like Architects or Korn won't draw a bigger crowd in, and that will affect the band and the size of the crowd itself. People won't be there to see them, and less people will go next year because it's not a good atmosphere, because there's not as many people there really. And this is pointing to the decline of rock and less rock acts making it up higher up on the bill. You have the pit stage, which I will always back to the hills. It's been great, and they always seem to nail it every year. But this seems to be the end of rock, the increase of hip-hop and electronic artists, and maybe the festival will be turned on its head and not be a metal and indie festival, but more of a dance and electronic and hip-hop and grime-focused festival, and rock will just be sinking down at the bottom in the pit, in the same way that the One Extra stage was once just by itself, and then these other acts were surrounding it, but then obviously that grew up and rock declined. Finally, the business side of things and the organisers behind everything. You got to look at these when you're looking at the artists that are booked, because they're obviously the ones that are getting booked and asking to come to the festival. The first thing that I will say is that I do appreciate Reading and Leeds having the wildcard pick. It does benefit the festival. It offers something new and fresh and different to what they normally provide there. But I think in this case, it's probably Kendrick Lamar, but he's very understandable in being a headliner. He has played before, but he is one of the hottest acts around right now, one of the biggest in the world. And then you have Fall Out Boy, who are kind of rock, but not really rock in terms of their latest music. They have this back catalogue to fall back on, but I don't think that they'll be dipping too much into that in their headline performance. They'll just be mainly sticking to the pop-centric tunes that they've released over the past couple of years. And Kings of Leon are not at their best by any stretch of the imagination, but they are a big band and a big act, so you can understand why they would bring them in, because they've played before. They're kind of like the old boys of the three, if you know what I mean. The crowds that they'll draw will be huge. I don't think it'll be on the scale of like someone like Foo Fighters or Rage Against the Machine or Metallica, but it will be quite big. Fall Out Boy I don't think will do that well in terms of main stage draw in terms of, you know, the first time that they first headlined a festival. They co-headlined back with Biffy Clyro, that was a few years ago, and now they're back as a full headline slot, so who knows what will go on there. But the mainstream attraction of Post Malone and the likes of Diplo and Hannah Wants as well, again, that wider breadth of genres and crowds that they'll draw to the festival in general. It's obvious what they're going for, and it's ticket sales, out and out ticket sales. It's all about a dollar. Looking back at the headline slots of the past few years, it's a similar story. You look at Radio 1 friendly Haim, they get a headline slot last year on the second stage. Yumi at 6 as well, very alternative rock, very radio friendly as well. Bastille subbing, and then you have the likes of Boy Better Know and Major Lazer filling up the upper echelons of the bill. And it looks like Reading and Leeds are turning into a festival that caters for all, with Glastonbury changing up their scheduling, no more Tea in the Park, no more V-Fest. It's obvious that Reading and Leeds will mop up those acts that will play there instead. And the UK being a very saturated market in terms of festivals, you have the likes of Download, Creamfields, Boomtown and Bloodstock for the weekend festivals, those open air festivals. And then you have your more niche festivals, the day festivals, a couple of days, a weekender, 2000 Trees, Slam Dunk Festival. They're happy to cater for the niche, as I said. And those other bigger festivals that I alluded to earlier, they're looking to cater for one audience, and it doesn't really look like that there's one that's going for all. And at the end of the day, the organisers want the festival to sell out. That is priority number one, really. They want all the tickets to be sold by the time the festival starts, and that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to book acts that will just appeal to as many people as possible so they can get as many ticket sales as possible. But in the process of sacrificing that identity, that heritage, I would say, of the real indie and rock vibe that they had, metal and that sort of thing, you knew what you were getting every year. You were getting 3 quality headliners and then a smattering, an absolute stacked bill. And if you just go back even 5 years ago, I would say you've got one of the best lineups in history, really. 2012, 2013 was some of the best years, I would think, that were going. And even before that, 10 years ago, 2008 was a great lineup. And then, you go further and further back, and as the festival was smaller and smaller, it doesn't get as good. But I feel as if it's kind of gone up, and then they've kind of plateaued, and then they've kind of gone down in terms of what you knew, what you were getting from every lineup. And I think, in all fairness, the casual fan won't really care about an identity that Reading and Leeds have. They're just more bothered about, a couple of headliners, a couple of bands up and down the bill. But I can imagine people can relate to me when I say I want a festival where the best bands are playing, and not just something that appeals to the mainstream and just throw in acts that I think will just kind of fit in and kind of relate, or just kind of fit into an alternative culture, instead of just actually sticking to what they know and what they think they should be as a festival, not just whatever they can get on the bill. And I didn't want to just shit on Reading Leeds. I just think that there's a bit of an identity crisis there. You don't see a solid narrative throughout the poster. It's just a very sort of disorganised mismatch. It doesn't really help the bands, in my opinion, because you don't really have people going there for the bands. And I think it's a lot to ask, and it's very optimistic to go there and say, well, this Post Malone fan is going to go to the main stage and watch Creeper and then get involved and love it and go away from it thinking I love Creeper or Water Parks or whoever. I think it's a very big ask for that. And fans today, they are becoming more diverse in what they listen to. I mean, myself and Nick, we both like hip hop and other genres of music, not just what we cover here on Salute the Magpie. But I feel as if that's becoming more blurred, but the festival environment doesn't really cater for that, and I think it's better to be more scene specific, and then you'll just end up having a better bill. But it's an interesting topic, and I want to know what you think about it as well. Please let me know in the comments. I feel as if we could have a really good dialogue here and a really good back and forth in this sort of discussion that we're having here. And I think there's more aspects and more things to be covered, but I feel as if these were the main points to be talked about and the main points that should be raised. So yeah, if you've got any ideas, let us know in the comments, and I'll be down there as well answering you guys. As always, if you enjoyed it, give this video a thumbs up. I really appreciate it. If you did enjoy it, it gives us a bit of an inkling whether you want us to do more videos like this, because I have so many ideas that we could talk about in terms of discussion type videos instead of just reviews, just interviews and that kind of thing. So please let us know. And sub as well if you haven't already. It really helps us out, and yeah, it just makes the channel grow. Thanks for watching, guys. I've been Jack, and we'll see you next time.